Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, for most of you, it's welcome back to day 2 of this online conference on consumer protection in the digital age. I'm Melinda Crane, and just in case you weren't with us yesterday, it's my pleasure to accompany you as moderator on behalf of our co-organizers, ASEAN and the German Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection. As you'll remember, we began the conference yesterday with a series of high-ranking opening remarks and keynotes that highlighted the crucial importance of ensuring a safer, more transparent, and more accountable online environment for consumers by enabling them, on the one hand, to control their own data, and on the other hand, to access legal remedies when transactions go wrong. This goal is becoming all the more important, especially in the Southeast Asian region, because of the exponential expansion of digitalization in general and e-commerce in particular. Yesterday's speakers outlined the opportunities, but also the risks that this expansion entails. In our closing session yesterday, we shared ideas and best practices, including both awareness-raising measures and initiatives, as well as technologies for promoting consumers' digital self-determination, for making online risks more transparent, and empowering online consumers to take control of their own data. Yet clearly, public awareness alone will not prevent abuses in online marketplaces. And today, we want to take a deeper dive on the topic of legal redress, of how to ensure that citizens who are defrauded in online transactions by e-commerce vendors can access remedies and dispute resolution. Those who were with us on day 1 will remember State Secretary Kastrup's reference to the promise of legal tech, and that's exactly where we want to pick up today. As many of you know, enforcement systems in Germany and Europe are somewhat different from those in ASEAN. In Germany, the enforcement of consumers' rights mostly occurs through individual citizens filing an action in civil court, with some additional possibilities for collective redress. In ASEAN member states, there is a primary reliance on public enforcement systems for consumer protection. Today, we're going to hear about how legal tech can help enforce people's rights in both systems. But first, just a very quick word on our own technology here at the conference. Later on at the end of the first session, dear ladies and gentlemen, you will have the opportunity to pose questions for our speakers. And you can do that by using the question window on this live stream on the right side of your screens. You can also send us short comments via the chat window just above that question window, and we will be passing those on to our speakers. Also, we're very eager to get your opinion, dear ladies and gentlemen, on our topics. And for that purpose, we have prepared a few audience polls to sample the wisdom of the crowd, as it were, including one I'd like to pose right now. You should see our question appear now on this live stream under the chat window, just above the question window. Please click on the answer that you prefer, and I will just read out our question or our statement in this case. In general, I would say that the current level of consumer protection in the digital world, that's our statement, and now you need to end that sentence with one of the following choices. A, is just about right. B, needs to be significantly strengthened. C, should be relaxed. So please finish the statement. I would say that the current level of consumer protection in the digital world is A, just about right, B, needs to be strengthened, C, should be relaxed. And in a moment, we will take a quick look at that result. Please do tell us now your top choice for finishing that sentence by clicking on the answer. So, in fact, so far, the absolute vast majority saying they do think protection needs to be significantly strengthened. Very, very few of you seem to feel that the level of protection we currently see is just about right. Just going to give this a bit more time to pan out. Got a nice even number there now. 95% saying consumer protection does need to be significantly strengthened. And if anything, that number is going up. Clearly, no one so far sees a need to relax the levels of consumer protection. So thank you very much. Very useful to get that sampling of the audience's opinion. And I'll just remind you, we have a very broad representation here amongst our online participants, with 46 different countries registered to take part in the conference, which is just fantastic. So many thanks for sharing your point of view. So let's pick up now on how legal tech can, in fact, help to strengthen protection for consumers. Because although technology obviously is part of the problem here, it also does offer innovative and effective solutions for facilitating consumers' access to legal remedies. As was the case yesterday, our next session aims at really having a hands-on concrete exchange about best practices in this area. And we begin in Germany with an input from the chairwoman of the German Legal Tech Association. She's a lawyer and co-founder of the consultancy This is Legal Design, and she previously served as head of legal innovation at the passenger redress startup Flightright. It's a pleasure to hand over the floor to Alicia Andert. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. Of course, I would like to shortly introduce myself. So if you could already show my slides, that would be amazing. Thank you very much. So before I speak about legal technology and how I think it helps with giving consumers access to justice, I would like to introduce myself to you. So I'm a lawyer. I'm also a design thinking expert. And as you've already heard from the moderator, I'm founder of This Legal Design, which is an innovation consultancy. But of course, I'm also chairwoman of the German Legal Tech Association. And to be fully transparent, I worked for Flightright, which is also a company that will take part in my presentation. So I think it is rather fair to say that I don't play a neutral role in the discussions on legal tech and access to justice. I would say I'm rather biased. So please keep that in mind when you hear my following words. Next slide, please. But how did I come to that conclusion that legal tech can improve access to justice? So we're going to start with a little story here. Once upon a time, there was the EU regulation number 261 in 2004. So most of you are probably not familiar with the numbered names of EU regulations, but I'm happy to translate. The EU regulation number 261 is also known as the Air Passenger Rights Regulation. In that regulation, you can find many different rules that are protecting air passengers. The most important one that many of you may have heard before is very interesting for consumers because it declares that air passengers are entitled to a financial compensation in case their flight was canceled or they were denied boarding. Or, and this was based on an ECJ ruling, their flight was delayed more than 3 hours. So in these cases, air passengers are entitled to a compensation between 250 and 600 euros. All of that can be found in that EU regulation number 261. Next slide, please. However, even after that regulation was introduced, there were hardly any cases brought to court by consumers to enforce their rights. So what we could see here is that there was a huge gap between consumer rights that are deriving from that regulation on the one hand, and the enforcement of those rights. So why is that? Well, we don't have a lot of empirical data on this, but I think it is very fair to say that there are a few reasons. One might be that people do not know about their rights at all. And another one might be that what was also confirmed by many people that we've spoken to, is that they are really afraid of the risk of costs for a legal trial. Or, and that is also a very solid reason, they get intimidated quickly by their corporate opponent. So in this case, airlines. And last but not least, there is also a general mental hurdle for consumers to bring their cases to legal professionals. I often hear from my friends and family that they are even afraid to go to a lawyer at all because they think it will be very expensive. And this seems to be especially the case when we are dealing with small claims, because the risk and effort that they have to bring to make their cases happen is way too big compared to the small claim that they have. And so those small claims deriving from the air passenger rights regulation, we remember 250 to 600 euros, were often remained not enforced at all. Next slide, please. And now this is where Flightrate came into place. And again, in full disclosure, let me remind you that I used to work for this company. But I still think that I can show you how Flightrate really helped to fix that problem that I just described to you. So Flightrate is an online service where air passengers can use a claim check that will tell them within a few minutes whether or not they are entitled to a compensation after a flight incident. Next slide, please. And this is how they do it. First of all, they're using data. The passengers' data, but also flight data from official flight databases and even data from, e.g., weather databases, because the weather conditions in those cases can be a reason for a flight delay. And in those cases, you are not entitled to a compensation. So with that data that they're using, an algorithm can actually calculate their claim pretty good. And of course, another aspect that Flightrate brings is the automated paperwork. So that means that certain process steps, e.g., the request of payment, that can be generated automatically from the data that passengers and other databases have brought to Flightrate. And then in the end, the compensation is paid to the customer with a success fee deducted. But, and that is another specialty, only if Flightrate was actually successful. So if they don't win a case, the customer doesn't have to pay at all. And this is what we call no win, no fee concept. And that is very attractive to customers, of course. And this is how Flightrate became one of the first legal tech companies in Germany, so to say. Next slide, please. But let's look at this a little more specifically. So what is actually so special about the legal tech way of doing law? So I think there are basically two things that we can see. First thing is the use of technology. So now it's possible to use data and scale. So with Flightrate, we could see using different data sources and automating process steps led to a scalability. And the second big thing is a product mindset, which means that you are using or you are creating intuitive and customer-centric services, which we could also see with Flightrate because it is a very easy to use tool. And it looks like many other online services that you've seen before on the internet, like online shopping. It's just very easy and intuitive to use. And also, you don't have risk of cost, which, as we learned earlier, is one of the main reasons why people do not execute their rights. So next slide, please. So how do these two aspects, use of technology and a product mindset, profit access to justice? Why do I think that legal technology is profiting access to justice within that regard? And I think that connection means, due to a product mindset, it is the goal of legal tech companies to help as many people as possible because they want to have customers. And due to the use of technology, they actually can help many more than a normal firm because they are able to scale their businesses. So in my mind, that means that their commercial interests are aligned with the interests of justice-seeking consumers. And thus, they are supporting access to justice for consumers. Now, as you can see here, there are different legal tech models with different impact on access to justice. And I just gathered some examples from the German legal tech market. So the first one are legal service providers, like Flightwide that you've heard just now, because they are law enforcement services. They help consumers to enforce their rights. And this is how they support access to justice. But they are not the only ones. The second category are basically simple tech tools. And those are tech tools that are specifically designed to promote legal work. That can be lawyer software, that can be a workflow automation or a document automation. And as two examples here, I brought two German companies called Brighter and Lawlift. Both are automating services. So they make the lawyers' work more efficient. And if lawyers work more efficient, they can help more people. And this is how the tech tools play a very important part in access to justice as well. And the third group are marketplaces for legal services. So they do not offer the services themselves, but rather help consumers to navigate around the legal service landscape. And I think that in reducing the complexity of the legal sector and making the search for services and answers more user-friendly, marketplaces also play an important role in access to justice. Next slide, please. But let's be really honest, not everyone is as excited about legal tech as I am. So I also wanted to bring your attention to some discussions around revolving around legal tech. So the first discussion is about the idea that legal tech companies are cherry picking, meaning that they only choose standard cases that are standardizable in a way. And this is not entirely true, as it can be seen from multiple ECJ rulings that, for example, Flightwide has actually brought to court. But I think in general, it's still fair to say that there is a tendency, of course, of legal tech companies to choose standardizable cases and to choose a field or small legal field in order to scale up in that specific field. However, I think that helping many people with the same problem still is a good thing. Second discussion is around business interests that legal tech companies have. And of course, this is true. I think there is no speaking around it. Legal tech companies do have business interests. But it's also important to say that this is also what makes the drive of these companies so strong. And let's be really honest here, are lawyers not always following business interests as well? So I don't think that this is a new problem. And the third thing is around restrictions. Lawyers are more restricted legally than legal tech companies. At least that is the case in Germany. And that is true. And also, to my mind, it doesn't really make sense. But we also have to say that the German Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection has just brought through a legislation that at least started to harmonize the current regulation. So these were the three main discussions that were revolving around legal tech companies. And in general, I hope that this keynote could give you some useful insights into the German legal tech world, and I'm happy to discuss later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alicia Andert. Very, very interesting and useful presentation in terms of thinking about how legal tech works and also how we can see the different types of legal tech services. And let me just say before we go on to our next input, dear audience, we are very eager to get your questions to our speakers in this session. So please do send us questions via the question tool that you'll see on the right side of this streaming window. On the right side of your screens, you just type in your question and I'll pass it on to our speakers a little bit later. So again, many thanks to you, Alicia Andert. We now continue with a perspective from an Indonesian startup that fits essentially that third category that Alicia Andert just mentioned in terms of different types of legal tech. Namely, this startup serves as a matchmaker, but in the legal arena. Justica is a legal tech platform that's designed to connect people in search of legal help to lawyers and other supporting services in the particular area of specialization that these online consumers require. We're joined by Justica's CEO and founder, who also launched one of Indonesia's first AI-based legal research tools. As you remember, that's another category of legal tech that Ms. Andert just outlined for us. That website is known as Hukum Online. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Mr. Melvin Sumapung. Please, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, everyone. And I'm really, really thankful for the honor and the opportunity that is given to us, to Justica, given our scale and our fairly early startup compared to what the other speakers has really done and move a lot of needle in terms of consumer protection. So yes, if I may, let me just go straight to the material. Next slide, please. So as the moderator has very eloquently explained just now, what Justica is all about is helping the access to justice problems, especially in Indonesia. So if you talk about quantity or numbers, there are around 110 million Indonesians at any given moment of time currently having legal questions, having legal issues in their mind in the last 2 years. But very sadly, 71% of them simply gave up when they faced those issues. It's also in a way consistent with what Alicia has mentioned and explained. Most people are in a way reluctant to fight for their rights. In Indonesia per se is mostly due to confusion, perception of price. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. Next slide. So what Justica is currently trying to do to help that is basically to create a platform where instead of giving up, these clients or these users could just immediately go to our platform, type in 2-3 sentences of what they are currently very stressed about in terms of legal issues. And then with under 5 minutes, they will be matched and chat with our curated lawyers by paying only around $2, which is around 30,000 rupiah. And they could chat for around 30 minutes. And if you also recall a lot of telehealth solutions, what Justica is doing is also quite similar with that. So as the lawyer examines the case, then the lawyers would quote unquote prescribe additional things on top of the chat inside the platform. For example, creating new documents, having the users to upload their own documents to be inspected with a certain premium. And as the case progresses, then the clients could then compare between opinions with other lawyers. And as they try what the lawyers has advised, they could then just come back to the platform and reorder other services. So next slide. And talking about what the current topic and theme of consideration today, when you talk about consumer protection issues, especially in the aspect and in the scope of Justika, well, to be honest, currently in terms of monthly volume, we receive around more than 1,000 cases every month. And sadly, only 8 of them are around consumer protection cases. It's less than 1%. And even further down, if you break down the cases, most of them are related to non-digital transactions, which is mostly conventional transactions, mainly land and property disputes. And 25% of them is considered around online transactions, such as e-commerce or things like that. And so the simple takeaway is that most consumers are still not willing to fight. And even with the ones that they do, usually they have really a lot to lose. For example, property or even rescheduled flights or things like that with very big risks. Next slide. And finally, what could basically legal tech players and people could contribute in terms of alleviating, consumer barriers and the motivating their own right or fight desires. The first one is basically trying to find ways to, at the end of the day, to educate and to encourage the public, the society, to at least fight and to not stand down when they have or they feel that their rights has been violated, in a very popular way, in a new manner, in a popular manner, where it is very rather chewable and in a way entertaining to the public as well. So we use social media, we use very simple and approachable methods. And then secondly, using design thinking and using technology, creating affordable and simple legal products. What does it mean with simple and affordable? Because these consumers are very, in a way, prone to friction when they want to fight for their own rights. What we aim to do, what we aim to build and develop is to have frictionless way for this consumer to just get in and reap off immediate benefits. So for example, taking away the focus out of consumer protection, when you talk about inheritance cases, especially about most Muslim cases, everything in terms of the legal issues and the legal rules can be in a way mapped into an algorithm whereby users can easily type in their family configurations, and the result of the estate calculation would come out. Then it is very simple and it doesn't need people to calculate for it. So it's very, very cheap and we offer it for free as well. So it's very affordable. And after that, when they have immediate value that, okay, I think I have in a way a stand to fight for my right, then they could talk to lawyer. And everything must be executed seamlessly. For example, when these people talk about their legal case, their legal problems, in under 5 minutes, they need someone to respond and to talk. And simple innovations other than legal, for example, e-money, e-wallet, it's also a very good catalyst to ease up and to create seamless transactions, because when they want to talk, they use simple e-wallets. Under 30 seconds they pay and they could immediately chat. So those three are the main solutions or innovations that is simple but could greatly alleviate barriers for consumers to fight for their rights. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Melvin Sumapung, for that look at the legal tech scene in your own country and in Southeast Asia. Let me just remind our online audience, we are very eager to hear your questions for our panelists, so please do send them via the question window on the right side of your screens, and I will pass them on to Alicia Andert and Melvin Sumapung. And let me start out, Unfortunately, we did just lose one question that I was about to pose, but let me then start out by asking you, Alicia, a typical argument that you sometimes hear from skeptics in regard to legal tech is that it increases the likelihood of what we would call frivolous lawsuits that don't necessarily have a serious case, but that in fact overburden the courts without perhaps necessarily having much merit. How do you see that likelihood, and what kind of quality control, if at all, is in place in regard to legal tech here in Germany and Europe to ensure that we don't get legal tech companies that are the equivalent of online ambulance chasers?
So to my mind, I think there are two options. People either are entitled to a right or they're not. And we either take it seriously that people can actually enforce those rights, or we don't. And I think what we see now is that the courts are not prepared for actually having all cases brought to court that are really legit. So I think this is basically it's a wrong question in a way, because do we want consumers to being able to enforce their rights, or don't we want that? And legal tech companies are helping consumers to enforce their rights. No legal tech company has any interest in bringing a case to court that for a person that's not entitled to a compensation or who doesn't have a right to do so, because they don't want to lose either. So I think the question should rather be, how can we ensure that our legal system is ready for everyone to enforce their rights? And another question would also be, maybe how can we also support alternative dispute resolution, because not everything needs to go to court. There are multiple ways to also settle cases outside of court. And in the case of Flightride, I can say that a lot has changed in those 12 years, I think that Flightride's been on the market, or 11 years, because at the beginning, they had to bring every single case against an airline to court. Why? Because airlines just would not pay. They wouldn't pay to consumers, and they also wouldn't pay to a company like Flightride, although the people were entitled to a compensation. So they brought every case to court. Of course, this means a lot of work for courts. Of course, our legal system needs to be digitized, needs to work more efficiently to even being able to handle all of that workload. But funny enough, after a few years, you could see that people, airlines were willing to settle outside of court, because they also didn't want to go to court for every single case. And this is how I think this massive litigating of one company has also had effects, positive effects on the legal system in that regard. So to my mind, I don't think that there needs to be a regulation to help people or to hold people away from enforcing their rights. I think this is not the right angle.
Yeah. Thank you very much for telling us a little bit about the developments in terms of settling cases out of court. That was going to be my very next question. So let me go over now to Melvin Sumampung and get your point of view on the same issues. We heard a number of speakers yesterday reminding us about capacity and resource limitations also within institutional structures in many Southeast Asian countries. So is there concern there that legal tech initiatives could overburden legal systems?
Yeah, I think to reiterate what Alicia has mentioned also on alternative dispute resolution, especially when you talk about e-commerce, and because most of the focus and the main thing that we want to think about is a new way of protecting consumers in terms of digital aspect, right? There are 2 points actually. The first one is that we have to also remember that protecting the consumers is also a main objective and a very important thing to the businesses as well. For example, if you talk about eBay, for example, back then eBay also had an initiative which basically launches an online dispute resolution, an alternative dispute resolution, which is called Modria. I don't know if it's still operating currently, but they really take a big action there to find a better and a more innovative way to, in a way, facilitate or moderate dispute between sellers and buyers in the scape of e-commerce without having them going to court, because in terms of business sense and economic sense, it just doesn't justify things. So first things first is that the first point clarifies that a lot of things can be done outside of court. And then, well, secondly, I think I'm not from a legal background, but I believe at the end of the day, what we can do is to basically expedite and to improve the way both parties agree on some point when they have a dispute, right? So it doesn't have to be court, and alternative dispute resolution, such as it is used for people in fintech as well. For example, when they have restructuring debts, you can create an algorithm to basically see usually how much people would want to restructure the tempo or the interest. So I believe there's still a lot of things and innovations can be done even without burdening the legal system.
Thank you very much. Let me take a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. I'm going to put two questions together that we have here. The first one comes from Alice Pham, and she is asking, or saying, first of all, thank you very much for the interesting presentations, and then asking, I'm wondering whether there are any downside risks, including privacy threats or algorithmic biases. And before you begin answering that, let me add on a different question that also goes to algorithmic biases. It comes from Carolina Pratama from the GIZ, the German Development Cooperation Organization, and she is asking how the different legal cultures in Germany and Indonesia affect consumers and how they exercise their rights, and whether, I'm sorry, we're not going to take that one yet. I have another one that's about algorithmic bias. It just jumped down in the, yes. Christina Klaus, no? Sorry, I'm sorry. Let's go back. Let's say we want to talk about algorithmic bias, and I'm just going to bring in a second question on that point. Legal tech tools are for sure quite helpful. We all know that algorithms have the potential to discriminate. Legal tech tools use them. How is it ensured that consumers will not be discriminated when using them? And that one comes in from Christina Klaus. Excuse me for the little confusion there. Alicia?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a very important topic. I think that it's become more and more obvious to us that the more we use technology, the more we also need to think about ethical requirements in that regard. And I think we also all know that algorithm itself, so the technology itself is not biased, but the data we feed to it is it can be. And I think there are certain fields where this is as specifically problematic, especially when it comes to, I think we've maybe all heard of that one example from the US, I think, where there was this tool that was predicting the likability of someone becoming a criminal again, and it was definitely saying that a Black person would be more likely to become a criminal again. And this is the problem when we feed algorithms with data that is already biased itself. However, I think we need to be aware of this and always look at technology that we're using and keep ethical requirements in mind whenever whenever we use technology in regard to people. But I think in the cases that I am thinking of right now, algorithms could even help to take biased predictions out of it, because when we're looking at just clean data that has facts in it, we're not looking at everything around it. And there are certain legal claims that should be looked at just with clean facts and not with the whole stories around it. So whenever that is the case, I think an algorithm could even help to reduce biases. However, I think that this needs to be taken into account, but I cannot think of an example right now from all the legal tech companies that I know where this could be a specific problem with regard to consumers.
Thank you very much. Before I go to Melvin for an answer to the same question, just one word on privacy issues, if you would, Alicia. As we know, European companies are subject to very strict privacy requirements. How's that working in the legal tech sphere in terms of ensuring the privacy of this confidential data clearly people are providing?
Yeah, definitely. Well, privacy is a big deal. So I think wherever you're using a technology, you also need to think the privacy requirements with it. And of course, there can always be a lack of security when you're using a technology and databases. So we all need to always have a really specific look at being very compliant with privacy rules. I can only tell that, of course, this is what the companies are dealing with. Because they're using technology, they're also used to keeping privacy requirements at mind. And I think we should also not forget that privacy is not only a matter when it comes to digital tools and digital services, but it's also a matter for every other lawyer and company, even when they're working more analogically. And sometimes we tend to look at digital services way more strict than we look at analog services, or when we compare the analog world and the digital world, sometimes we tend to see the privacy matter only in the digital world, whereas actually it's the same thing. When I have files piling up on my desk and I'm sharing this office, I have a privacy matter as well. So I think it's a little funny that we always tend to be a little more strict with the digital world, but I am definitely agreeing that privacy is a matter that needs to be taken into account at any point.
And Melvin, can I ask you to address the same 2 points? So the point about algorithmic bias and also the issue of privacy protection. Is legal tech in Indonesia also wrestling with the same issues, and how are you solving them?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So on there are 2 points on the first question on algorithmic biases. I think the first one is, well, given the ability and the quality of the algorithms that we develop, we do have to be very mindful on the space or the decision space that we put the algorithm into first. So for example, if I talk about Justika, we are not yet able, and I think still in the long run, to be able to use algorithms to in a way help or to manipulate or help or assist lawyers in their legal substance area, legal decision making, advising, things like that. But we use it to basically more in terms of in the marketing of the legal services space. So because we're a marketplace, there are two aspects of the business, right? First one is matchmaking the lawyers, and second one is the solution delivery of the legal service itself. So in the first space, we use a lot of algorithms to basically scale and match lawyers to each case. And that's number one. So the severity or the risk, if the algorithm goes wrong, it should be in the first place be calculated. And then secondly, I guess for every algorithm, I think all the legal tech players also has this in mind, has a backup plan. For example, when things go wrong or doesn't really work as long or effectively with the algorithms, because at the end of the day, you always need to have a manual plan or manual processes, right? So, for example, in Justika, when our model wrongly, in a way, matchmake a lawyer with a client, for example, then we basically the users, every lawyers gives reviews, and when they provide a very bad review, 1 star out of 5 star, for example, the team would then get a notification, and then our admin then contact the clients and then provide them with a new lawyer and new chat, for example. So as long as the algorithm is put in a place where the risk can be mitigated and managed, then it should be fine.
Okay.
And yeah, secondly, in terms of data privacy, yeah, I do think, especially with a lot of issues in the country recently, I guess a lot of people has heard of it as well. What we aim to do and what we currently doing is to basically always, in a way, because it's also hand in hand working with our business, right, is to limit the data that we collect. So, for example, if people want to chat inside Justika, they don't need to provide names, because we don't need their names. They can always be private, and providing names, for example, would then add another barrier, because they would then think about secrecy. They think about not being able to share their, in a way, dirty little secrets. So then we don't ask for names. So we clearly would ask and acquire data where it's really, really needed.
So anonymization. Thank you very much. Let me now pick up on another question that also has come in from the audience, and it addresses some of the issues that you've just been raising, Melvin. It's from Carolina Pratama from the GIZ, as I said, the German Development Cooperation Organization, and it is this, the question reads, how do you see the different legal cultures in Germany and Indonesia affecting consumers and their ability to exercise their rights? And in your respective experiences, can legal tech be the solution to help consumers become more assertive? So this time around, let me begin with Melvin and ask you to address that issue around legal culture and where you see the biggest challenges.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I have to put a disclaimer first, because I'm not really, in a way, well educated with what the German society and the Germany people has in terms of their perspective on legal. But with a few sentences or a few lines that Alicia has mentioned, in a way, it is very, we face the same challenges, I believe, because the people that have their rights violated think that it's just too much of an effort to fight for their own rights. So I think the main challenge is to, in a way, firstly, educate and encourage people in a very popular and simple manner, but at the same time, eliminate any barrier for them to at least try to fight. And that's why we create a very simple solution. Within 5 minutes, they could immediately talk to lawyers with a very affordable price, right? In a way, the challenges is also, especially in an Indonesian perspective, is since the beginning of social media, and then yeah, mostly social media, more people are beginning to be able and to be more open to voice out their opinions, because we're an Asian country. People are not really litigious, but 2 to 3 years back, I remember watching in the TV, a sociologist said people are beginning to value less on the harmony or the nice or peaceful relationship between people, and just try to just fight and beginning to, to rely on the virality of social media to get people to also put attention to what you're fighting for.
Interesting. So an individualization in people's perceptions of their rights within society. Let me go to Alicia with the same question about the legal, cultural aspect of all of this.
Well, thanks, first of all, Melvin, for giving that insight. I have no idea really how it's going in other countries. I think it's quite fair to say that at least Germans are not hesitant when it comes to thinking that they are right about something. I think this is definitely not a cultural issue, but still, I think in general, in enforcing your rights, there still is a huge hurdle, and that is something that I've already talked about in my presentation, and that we've also now heard from Melvin. So it's a difference between thinking that you're right and enforcing your rights. And I think that first of all, it is really scary for people to go to a lawyer. They're afraid of the costs. It's more scary even for them to go to a court. So something that for us seems to be very normal, because as a lawyer in Germany, you've always worked in a court for some time. It's not scary at all. It's just a normal building. It has a really nice entrance, but then when you walk a little further in it, it just looks like a normal building, and you're not scared of it at all. When you're a legal professional. But once you take a step back and you talk to other people, and I'm not even like talking about young people or people who've not had any touch with the state, but just like everyone basically is like very respectful when it comes to courts and legal trials, and it scares them. And I think this is something that in general should change. I think that the court system could also become more of a service provider to the people themselves. And what legal tech can do in that matter is that legal tech could help to reduce the barriers, to reduce the hurdles, to make it much easier to communicate with courts, with legal professionals, and for consumers to basically handle their claims themselves when we build it like other digital services that are very easy to use for people and that they understand. And I think this is also what we can learn from other digital companies if we want to improve the law enforcement.
Thank you very much. Let me pick up on perhaps a different aspect of the cultural issue, or of the question of how do we reach people, because both of you have pointed out that it's important for people to know what rights they have in order for them to take advantage of legal tech that will essentially seek redress. So we've talked quite a bit yesterday about vulnerable consumers, people who perhaps have less familiarity with the internet, people who are perhaps less educated about their rights. How do you get the word out to them about these websites? Clearly, you've tried to make the websites easy to use. Nonetheless, the question is, for people who are perhaps not often online, is this an option for them, or is it at least as daunting as the big justice building that Alicia just described? And I'll start with you, Alicia, on this point.
Well, that's a big topic, and I think it's rather political. I don't even think that the legal tech sector can help with that general lack of knowledge about legal matters. I'm not sure I can properly answer that question, but I would definitely look at it like like a marketing issue, if you want to say so. So I think there are multiple ways to bring information to people. Advertisement is doing this really well. And I don't think that they don't reach vulnerable consumers. I think they reach everyone. So I think maybe this is something that we should look into. How are other stakeholders dealing with bringing information to the people and then treat it as exactly that? I don't think that this is a specific legal tech topic. So of course I can say how other legal tech companies have done it. Most of that is digital. Some of that is also analog. So there are also campaigns that are not happening in the digital sphere, but most of it is digital because very most of the people are using digital services. They're not always going to specific websites, but they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. And we've seen before that that other political campaigning was especially happened through social media platforms. And why not also use these platforms that people go to actually give to them some useful information on their own rights.
Thank you very much. And let me ask Melvin the same question. Vulnerable consumers, consumers who perhaps aren't that familiar with online sites at all, what do you do to reach them?
Yeah, so I think now it's still a very big homework for Justika, because even with the internet literate or digitally literate people, we haven't created that perfect and complete product. But I do think that in order to achieve this vision at the end of the day, because access for justice is for everyone, we have to partner up. It cannot be something that the legal tech player could done itself. So first one, partner up with the public sector, because especially the government, because at the end of the day, they are also have the obligation to basically provide the same justice access for everyone in the country, right? So they have municipalities, they have offices, local government offices. Simply put a tablet, simply put a very simple handheld device there, and people, and particularly if you look at some surveys, most people also, when they have legal issues, they sometimes go to local authorities as well, on top of police and local leaders. They go there, and when you put handheld device, and as long as the digital relying on digital infiltration in the country, coming in and every corner in the country, it can help. And then secondly, since also working with startups and tech players, that's also doing a lot of things in terms of providing access for people in I'm beginning to get more bias on the rural areas, for rural areas to access digital services. So currently a lot of tech players are providing or creating agents. We call it offline to online experience, right? These agents have very simple smartphone. And if you talk about rural areas, for example, out of one village, probably only 2 or 3 people have mobile phones, right? But these mobile phones, because it's connected, they use it to provide payment services for people all around. They use it for people to send money from the city to the rural areas. And these handheld devices can also be used to provide legal access and to basically put Justika services or other legal tech players also there. So I think those two can possibly be a great way to catalyze the information even to the non-internet literate people.
Thank you very much. We don't have a lot of time left. I have a couple of quick questions still left, a couple from the audience, one that I'd like to bring in. First of all, if you would, just a very brief word. There may be young tech fans with us who think, wow, this is a great idea. I would love to get involved in this. What do you see as the barriers to entry for someone who's interested in starting up a legal tech initiative? And what are the key things they need to know? Very briefly, if you would, please. Alicia.
Well, just get in touch with other legal tech companies and players from your country, because I can say that this field is very open to new talents and interested people. So just get to know the people working around it.
Thank you. Melvin?
Yeah, so basically, the main barrier is yourself. So just try to do it, get the first few customers, and then you can grow from there.
Thank you very much. Then we had a question that came in from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact wording of the question with me anymore, but it essentially asked both of you, if you were to give your governments, your respective governments, one piece of advice about how to facilitate and support legal tech, what would it be? Alicia?
God, you should have started with Melvin, because I have so many things.
That's all right. Go on. Jump in.
Well, one advice, please just really try to get to know what we're doing properly, and don't try to fall into old narratives. So that's one advice. Just really get to know the services.
Thank you so much. Melvin?
Yeah, I think in the same note, just communicate with us more. And secondly, try just not to basically put everything in a regulatory framework. Just try to do it and then see whether it's really impactful or not.
Mm-hmm. So both of you are highlighting the fact that we can't simply transfer frameworks and systems from the analog world into this new world, that there are case-specific or institution-specific characteristics that need to be understood before regulators act. Thank you very much. One last question that also had come in from the audience was a question about the fees and essentially standardized fees, how you determine them, and whether you can be sure that they are sufficient for the legal tech organizations essentially to survive. Alicia?
So you mean fees that we ask for legal services?
Yeah, the kind of fees that a legal tech company would, or let's say the percentage that a legal tech redress organization deducts. How is that set, and how can the organization be sure that it will essentially be enough?
Well, it is a simple business case, and this is how every company would calculate their prices. This is how also a legal tech company would calculate their prices, and then most of the times in Germany, at least, you take 30% of the claim outcome, but it can also be more, it can also be less. It really depends on costs and revenue, like in every company. So this is actually a very clear business administrational question.
And Melvin, how do you set your fees and how do you ensure that they will be adequate?
Yeah, so simply just make sure that for every customer that comes in, the unit economics are positive. So the cost to acquire the customer and to serve them is lower than what they pay for, minus everything that we have to provide to the lawyers as well. That's simply a business calculation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And Alicia, a participant, Mr. RJT from the Philippines Department of Trade and Industry, had asked about the cherry picking issue. And he says, would it not be beneficial for both consumers and companies, given that if the legal tech organizations do sort of filter out some of the better cases, that gives better results to consumers and also stimulates normal law firms to be better?
I think that's a good statement.
Okay. So Alicia says, yes, we're just about out of time, but sitting next to me patiently here in the studio is an expert from the German Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection. And I'd like to just so briefly give her a closing word to kind of wrap up what we've been hearing here. So Katharina Rosenstiel, please, if you would, the floor is yours. Just a quick comment on what struck you during this discussion.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you both, Alicia Andert and Melvin Sommerpong, for your very interesting insights. Of course, legal tech is not only an issue for private companies, it's also a question we are dealing here in the ministry. And we are in close contact with the legal tech businesses, and of course also the government or our courts need to be digitalized and modernized, and we are currently examining whether there's a legal and or the legal and technical framework for introducing an online proceedings here in Germany. But we are at the very beginning of this examination, and of course it's also important to obey all the principles of the rule of law in introducing such services or proceedings. And yeah, the government is of course more restricted here than the legal tech companies. And well, we'll see where we get. Thank you both so much, and thank you all.
And thank you very much, Katharina von Rosenstiel, for being with us here in the studio and for sharing that point of view. Dear ladies and gentlemen, as we heard from Melvin Sommerpong as he gave his presentation, in the end, the efforts of the legal tech companies are about nothing less than ensuring a fairer society and access for all consumers to the ability to enforce their rights. And I want to just remind everybody of how that links back up with what we heard in yesterday's keynote from the ASEAN Secretariat in regard to the goal of establishing an ASEAN-wide network for online dispute resolution in order to improve the access of not only consumers, but citizens in general to justice. So many, many thanks to Alicia Andert and to Melvin Sommerpong for sharing what legal tech is doing in your respective societies and legal cultures. It's been a fascinating exchange. And dear ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to take a break. I wish it was a real networking break where we could all get together and continue the conversation. Unfortunately, it's a virtual one. Nonetheless, I invite you to get up, stretch your legs, get some refreshment, and let's all meet back here in exactly 21 minutes at hour to continue with a multi-stakeholder panel that will endeavor to tie together all the different threads of the discussions that we've been having. So see you back here in 21 minutes. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everybody had a refreshing break. Hard to believe, but we are now moving into the closing sessions of our online conference. And so it's time to tie together all the different threads of the multiple dimensions of consumer protection that we have been talking about over the past 2 days. And we're also going to take a look forward. So as we move to do both of those things, let's just remember where we're coming from. Yesterday, we explored policy measures and technologies for educating consumers about their online risks and rights, for raising awareness and improving transparency. And today we've been asking how consumers can access legal remedies when online transactions go wrong, when their rights are abused. And we heard just now about some very exciting new tools for doing just that make tech part of the solution rather than the problem. Across all of these dimensions, stakeholder cooperation is absolutely crucial. Empowering consumers requires initiatives on the part of politicians and regulators, as well as civil society and business. And what that means in practice and how we can leverage effective cooperation in future. These are the topics for our closing panel in this conference. It is a great pleasure now to welcome our guests. Ms. Lena Sophie Müller is with us. She's director of the NGO D21, which is Germany's largest network of business and political leaders for digital society. She's a scientist and an expert on AI, and she also serves as deputy chair of the Young Digital Economy Advisory Council to the German Federal Minister for Economic Affairs. It's also a great pleasure to welcome Mr. Hans Wolfgang Michlitz. He's professor for economic law at the European University Institute in Florence. He's a renowned expert on European and German commercial law, product safety, and unfair business practices, and serves as a member of Germany's Advisory Council for Consumer Affairs, SVRV. And I'm so pleased that I can greet Ms. Helena Laurent. She's Director General of Consumers International. It's a network spanning over 200 consumer advocacy groups in more than 100 countries. Its work focuses on empowering consumers and driving changes in the marketplace. And she brings a wealth of private sector experience to our discussion, including high-level positions at Tesco, Unilever, and McKinsey. And I'm so pleased to introduce Mr. Saravanan Thambiraja. He's Director of Communications at the nonprofit Consumer and Human Rights Advocacy Group, ERA Consumer Malaysia. He previously served as CEO of the Federation of Malaysian Consumer Associations. Great to have you with us. And finally, I'm very glad to welcome Ms. Ruth Castello. She's Undersecretary for Consumer Protection in the Department of Trade and Industry of the Philippines. She's a lawyer by training and has also served as Undersecretary of Competitiveness and Ease of Doing Business for her country's Construction Industry Authority. So a great high-level panel here, dear ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome all of our speakers. And as you know, let me just remind you that a key objective of our conference is to advance consumer protection by sharing lessons learned and hands-on experience. So I'd be very grateful if all of you in your remarks would please include concrete examples and share your own experience. And also, in the interest of maximizing interaction, I will kindly ask you to keep your responses pretty concise, meaning around 3 minutes or less. And I will begin by asking all of you to highlight with 1 or 2 specific best practice examples a key way in which your ministry or your organization is empowering consumers and or enforcing their rights in the digital economy. And we'll go in exactly the order in which I just introduced everybody. That means I'll start with Lena Sophie Müller. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And it's an honor to be here today and to discuss in this very wonderful round. Particularly when it comes to digitalization, it's actually a question about shaping the future, right? It's about setting the course for the future. So as Initiative D21, we consider ourselves as a network of different actors. So we try to bring together all those different actors and create and shape the future. So that's why we, for example, launched the Digital Future Challenge, which is a student competition. So we brought together companies who work in the field of digitalization, who submit concrete case studies where they actually see a problem or a challenge, and where they also see a corporate digital responsibility and think that they should do something. And the students then, supported by the universities and interdisciplinary coaches, they develop ideas and solutions, and thus they can also contribute their perspective from a young age in order to solve the challenges of the future. And this project is also supported by the political dimension. The Federal Ministry, Christine Lambrecht, supported this project. And why do I think this is so important is from the point of view of Initiative D21, it is very essential to raise awareness especially among the next generation, and to do that at a very early stage. So while they're still in the education field, and we need to support to involve them as shapers of the digital future. So I do think that a digital future challenge, which brings together industry, politics, universities, is a great way to do that, and also to work on very specific case studies from different fields, be it digital sustainability or digital literacy, be it the field of communication, of elderly care, so I do think that's a best practice example.
Thank you very much. So picking up once again on need to raise awareness both of how to use digital options like legal tech, and also to raise awareness in general of both risks and opportunities. Very relevant indeed for consumer protection. Let me go now to Professor Miklitz. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Let me refer to two examples as you asked for best practices. One, in my role as a member of the advisory board for consumer affairs at the Ministry of Justice. 2 years ago, we wrote an opinion where we analyzed the perspectives of consumer law, and we called it Consumer Law 2.0. And here we tried to go through all the rules that govern consumer protection from the beginning to the end, from cradle to grave, so to say, and to look into what does it bring with regard to use that language, empowering consumers, and also to come up and discuss with how consumer law could be integrated into what has become now so fashionable, the discussion on artificial intelligence. Yeah? So means to infiltrate consumer law issues into the development of algorithms. So for those who are interested in this, they may look at the report, who is available in English on the website. The second project that I developed more in my capacity when I was still in Florence at the European University Institute, we set up a project that we called Claudette. You may find it under that name. And that is an automated system to discover unfair standard terms that we extended then to discover unfair data privacy policies. And we are working on this project in a bigger team together with colleagues from a number of countries. And it doesn't have a German perspective, it has a European perspective. The benchmark is European consumer law, European data privacy law. And it can also be used in different languages. That's what we are working on. And the overall idea is that everybody who is interested can check whether the standard terms or data privacy policies contain illegal practices or doubtful practices as a warning system. So that is an ongoing project. I can invite everybody to test it, which would help us to improve it. I think that is a way in our understanding that could really help consumers and consumer organizations and consumer agencies to be better equipped when it comes to go through all these vast material, hundreds and hundreds of pages that are governing the relationship of the consumer to the internet providers or to the traders that offer their products over the internet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So again, an example there of how to perhaps increase people's awareness of and understanding of risks. Let me go now to a consumer organization, that is to say to an umbrella consumer organization. Helena Leroy, please.
Great, thank you. I think at this point, the organizers asked for a presentation. So if you are open to that, we can show it at this point.
Certainly. If you can keep it pretty brief, that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely, just following guidance. So we were asked to share what perceptions are from consumer advocacy and also guidance and thoughts for the future. If you can go to the next slide, you see that we gather perceptions from across the world. And to the next slide, also, typically we have one organization per country. In this case, you can see that within ASEAN, we have a number. In some cases, consumer advocacy does not exist. And in others, it is particularly strong. Glad to comment that our president is based in Malaysia. If we go to the next slide, you can see that consumer advocates look to a range of different approaches which will be necessary for a digital marketplace to work. Consumer awareness is only one of them. At a time of incredible change, you cannot expect consumers to be aware of all of the different aspects of change, and we must make sure that the system works for them. It's wonderful to see that the G20 digital ministers made a call for consumer awareness. This has to be based on a range of changes by all the actors in the system. If we can go to the next slide. In the interests of time, we certainly have a vision where a digital future is possible, and also where one is collaborative across regions and around the world. This is the global issue. If in talking in individual nations, this will not work if we keep solely focused on a nation basis. Next slide, please. So you probably won't be able to see some of this. What we try and show here is how much of what consumer advocates have to do to make the marketplace work. One of the key things they do is public awareness. This is often done, and I would argue with those in the prior conversation that we just use technology to create awareness. Half of the world does not have access. And we need to create awareness, create access. As an example, I would look to recently our work with members in India who helped in some of the poorest communities there, not just generating awareness through things like puppet shows locally, but also making sure that local retailers, local manufacturers, local governments were aware of the changes needed in the system to support consumers locally. I think it's also important here to show how much digital rights and privacy are important for consumer advocates everywhere. They're increasing in importance. In fact, in the next 3 years, they're likely to be some of the top issues, even for low-income countries. But remember that there are many, many other things during economic crisis and at a time when we need to meet our SDGs that we need to work on together. Next slide, please. Here, really sort of what would make the digital marketplace better? Well, security, cybercrime issues need significant progress, and enforcement is something that you can see across the world. Our respondents in ASEAN would follow that pattern. If we can go to the next slide. Here, really, there could be a great deal more that is done at national level. Again, a strong view from both global and also national players, but a slightly different perspective, perhaps stronger in terms of cybercrime in ASEAN than in other locations. Perhaps a note that ASEAN countries are a little bit more advanced than many others in terms of thinking about the impact of technology and what it can do. If we can go to the next slide. Here, I think it's important to note that consumer advocates are aware of what could be possible and are dissatisfied with how things are progressing, see that much more is available, including things like market monitoring. If we can go to the next slide. And engagement. I think it's fascinating that you see a call for greater awareness, greater engagement amongst stakeholders, but even where countries are advancing into thinking about AI policy, or in fact, we asked about a range of other topics, the level to which civil society is engaged in thinking that through and really making sure it works is quite limited. And that is a huge opportunity for policymakers right now, so that you get that feedback loop, so you ensure it works. Next slide, please. We asked our members, and I'm just sharing 3 of the responses here, about what could be improved, especially in terms of e-commerce, to respond to the questions posed by this conference. You can see that across the board, needs differ, but people feel that they are in a more insecure marketplace. Scams have increased everywhere. And if we can, at the very least, look at ways in which we can improve the security of people online, and then most certainly dispute resolution, which is so it's great to hear the goal at the start of this conference to create an ASEAN-wide approach. Next slide, please. And here, just pinpointing a couple of ways in which consumer advocates engage and help. In Malaysia, FOMCA has been heavily engaged, not only in creating tools for consumers, but it being involved in local government. I'm sure Saravanan will talk about this, but again, a call for urgency and greater awareness and greater support for this shift. If we can go to the next slide, moving to Singapore. This is common across a number of countries, but in Singapore, they wanted to highlight in particular the apps created for consumers to give better transparency about prices in this case in particular. And then third, if we can go to the final slide on here, this is an issue that we see of particular relevance. We know that typically consumer policy focuses on topics of e-commerce. Consumer advocates look at the full consumer experience. Digital finance right now must be at the top of the agenda. It's the reason why we have decided to focus World Consumer Rights Day on digital finance for next year. If you wouldn't mind just keeping up the final slides, because I would like to make sure that we reflect the call, if you go to the next slide, for a global effort. The current international efforts are not sufficient. They are not joined up. They are not urgent enough. And if you go to the final slide, the opportunity is there for a platform that can connect those who are learning on this topic. We would ask that that does happen. ASEAN and Europe are some of the most advanced areas. I would argue also look to the States and focus in on the ways in which we can increase consumer awareness and protection. Happy to talk more about that, and I hope I fitted it into your time frame. Thank you.
I did not see the final slide. Let me just ask our technical team, can we get the final slide up just so that we do have that last closing slide? Dear technical team? Yes, there we go. Opportunity for Learning platform. Great. Thank you very much. That was an extremely good interview that did exactly what I suggested, tying together a number of different strands of what we've been discussing and also bringing in the cross-cultural perspective. So I thank you very, very much for that. And let me go now, indeed, to Saravanan Thambiraja. He's Director of Communication, as I said, in Malaysia, and in fact, part of that umbrella group that is represented by Helena Laurent. So please tell us a little bit, quite specifically, as I said, hands-on, about what your organization is doing in this area.
Thank you, and thank you for giving FOMCA an opportunity to speak today. Now, one thing about creating awareness, there's lots of information out there, and how do we get it, and how do you reach out to people? And thus, FOMCA, what we did, we have this annual campaign, we call it National Consumer Program, and we've been organizing this since 2002 and ongoing until this year. Now, what is the program in National Consumer Day program? Okay, the primary objective of the program is to facilitate the development of responsible, mindful, and matured consumers. Responsible, mindful, and matured consumers are consumers who have the right knowledge, attitude, and skills to manage their consumption and personal finances efficiently for their personal and financial well-being. Now, to achieve that goal, FOMCA uses two approaches. Now, first, consumer educators go to school, consumer clubs, industries, and community to talk about issues relating to consumerism. Now, this campaign, what we organize this campaign, we work together with various stakeholders, which compromise with industry, government, and also civil society organization. When we talk about government, two major ministries involved, which is Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, and also Ministry of Education. Now, take note, every year we'll reach out to almost 160 schools conducting sessions for many students, and also about 200 community sessions reaching out more than 500,000 people for the year. The second part of the campaign is through participative learning, which we give them opportunity for them to participate in our competitions. We have various competition, which is coloring competition, essay writing competition, poster competition, photography, blogging, video montage, and so many other competitions. And for your information as well, this campaign has been recognized by Malaysian Book of Record for 3 years for having largest number of participants. And all the participants who join our competition, they will get certificate which carry some mark for their co-curriculum activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now let's get a point of view from government and go to Ruth Costello, please.
Oh, yes. Hello. Afternoon. I'm pleased to be here. For the Philippines, the Department of Trade and Industry is the biggest consumer protection arm in the whole country. And we have a consumer protection group that safeguards the interests of the consumers. And we also attempt to do cross-border, protect cross-border trade, especially now that the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the dynamics of digital and cross-border trade. Consumer awareness in the Philippines rose to 81% in the last quarter of 2020. Comparing to the previous years, pre-pandemic, the consumer awareness in the Philippines was only at around 60%. You would note that perhaps it was because people were mostly at home and they had nothing to do, or they thought better to join us in social media. We maximize the use and benefit of social media. We have consumer care pages in Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we also have, the department has bought this channel in YouTube. We have our own DTI YouTube channel for the consumers. We also now, beginning last year at the start of the pandemic, we conduct consumer care webinars on various consumer topics, attempting to address also consumer issues. We have resource persons from both the government and the private sector, and we do this twice a week at least. Pre-pandemic, we have been doing consumer care, consumer education and awareness campaigns in the provincial and regional offices of the DTI. But because it was a pandemic, we also maximized the use of the internet. We also have, to raise consumer awareness, we also have a DTI paid consumer affairs program in the largest network in the Philippines. We have this both on TV and radio so that we can access the farthest areas in the country. And we do this once a week. Like I mentioned, it's a consumer affairs program. And this is intended basically to educate the consumers and to raise their awareness. But most importantly, I believe that, we also have the consumer redress. We make ourselves available and accessible to the public. We post our consumer hotline number in social media and on TV. We also have videos that provide education to the consumers on consumer complaints handling. It's now, of course, a lot easier. We do it online. Mediation and adjudication is done online. We have a no wrong door policy where we are able to facilitate any kind of consumer complaint or inquiry so that when it is not within the jurisdiction of the department, we elevate it or throw it to the agencies concerned. We are also working on our Philippine Online Dispute Resolution System. We are currently on our phase 2. This is we're currently setting it up, and this is our obligation to the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection, like Mr. Louis Tek Kyung mentioned yesterday. And as soon as we are done, well, I have to mention that the GIZ is also helping us in the ASEAN, so that as soon as we are done, we will be ready to integrate this towards the ODR system of the ACCP. I believe that it's the engagement. In order to achieve engagement of the consumer, we need to make government accessible to all of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for emphasizing that tie between consumer protection and e-governance as a whole. Let me now ask all of you whether the primary focus of your organization and/or institution is public awareness or legal redress, where you see the main challenges, and perhaps your organization, of course, is doing both. Many of you, in fact, are. But where do you see the main challenges and obstacles, the most crucial need for change, essentially? And again, I'll go straight down the line, starting with Ms. Müller.
Thank you very much. Well, Initiative D21 has a focus on raising awareness, and we do this, for example, by doing surveys, population surveys and studies. And one thing that we think is very important is to measure digital skills, for example, in order to see if there are any government measures, do they actually have the impact that was intended. I see a very central aspect in skills, as like I said before, education and teaching digital skills. And I would also like to explain why, because when we do our surveys and our studies, we see two main patterns that, in my opinion, are very important for consumer protection. And one is that we do have a digital skills gap that emerges between application skills. So if you are able to use, for example, technology, and the more complex comprehension and transfer skills. So do you comprehend what is actually going on in the digital world? And this gap emerges especially between the elderly and the younger, the more educated and the less educated, the richer and the poorer. So we definitely see that we need to focus more on problem-solving competencies, and we need to reach those in the population that actually need it most. The second pattern I would like to raise awareness for is when we ask the population what they actually would like politics to focus on when it comes to shaping the digital world, we see that those who prioritize consumer protection more often than average, they actually prioritize education and training less often than average. So in other words, we do see that those who are actually already digitally savvy and who are using the, or who actually live in the digital world very, very easy, they do see education and digital skills as their main strategy to protect themselves. Whereas the ones who do not see that, maybe also because they don't really have much touch points in their life with the digital world yet, they see protection as their main strategy. And this becomes a problem because the speed at which digitalization will bring us innovation is accelerating. And thus the strategy which will actually, bring us the most in the digital future or in the future in total is to protect ourselves a lot more. And that means we need to understand the world we live in, and we need to be able to educate ourselves, to get the skills, we need programs that actually teach the ones who need it the most, and those are especially the elderly, especially the less educated, and especially those who do not have a huge income per month.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And indeed, vulnerable online consumers has been a major part of what we've been talking about here for the past 2 days. Professor Miklitz, biggest challenges that you see in this area, be it in the redress area or in the public awareness area? I think you're on mute, sir.
Here I am. Thank you. Thank you. That's a great question. I think the biggest challenge is getting access to the interface. Because what I was missing in Helen's wonderful agenda is the role of technical standards, the role of algorithms. And here, as you may know, there is a worldwide move towards standardization and to solve all the consumer issues or whatever there is on the table via standardization at whatever level. And what we need is, in a civil society perspective, is a cooperation between academic institutions and consumer organizations in order to guarantee first access to the interface, because access to the interface is a precondition to have a look into the famous black box and to understand really what's going on there and to discover who is affected, what kind of discriminations are coming on the table. And in Europe, there is currently a proposal on the table, the Digital Governance Act. And here, access of researchers to the interface is discussed, and it's channeled via national public authorities, and that is a disaster. Yeah, what's needed is access, as I said, because that is a precondition to for empowering, for raising awareness, for improving enforcement. Without this access, I think we will only have a kind of a ex post risk management. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting indeed. Helena Laurent.
Yeah, so I will segue very much from Professor Miklitz's comments there. I would say sort of we are going through, hopefully, a decade of vast transformation for the good, where we will find ourselves somewhere closer to the Sustainable Development Goals, where technology does great things for our society and we reduce inequality. Now, to get there, do we spend more time trying to help people understand every single change that's going on around them, from biotech to AI to, you name it? Or do we spend time making sure people have access to safe technology? And making safe technology comes from, as Professor Miklitz beautifully said, the standards, the regulation, and the enforcement. So back to that point about what we're missing is that joined up platform and conversation about how we get there fast. And right now we're out of kilter, we're out of balance. We need the approaches that actually put the safety mechanisms for consumers in place really rapidly. As a very sort of simple example, to add on IoT, where are the standards for safe and secure consumer IoT? There is maybe one out there, Etsy, and maybe there is some interest in taking some of the first 3 clauses about security. Not sufficient, not enough. If we really want people to lean into this, hopefully green and golden decade, let's make it worth their while.
Thank you very much. And again, a link also back there to Ms. Müller's comments, and I'm going to go back to her in a moment for a response to that. But first, let me get the point of view on challenges from our ASEAN participants. Tharavanan Samaraja, what do you see as the main challenges in terms of the work that you're doing? Where do you see the biggest gaps or needs for change?
One thing, when you said the primary focus, whether it should be a public awareness or redress mechanism. I think both plays important role. Without public complaint or redress, you won't have data and statistics for you to go and do public awareness and so on. For us, you need valid data and statistics so that you can justify that to consumers out there. With that justification, then you can draft out public education programs, you can come out with education materials and so on. And with that also, you can lobby to the government, the relevant authority and relevant enforcement unit to go down and check, do proper enforcement and so on. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ruth Costello? Challenges?
Oh, yeah. Yes, thank you. This is now the new normal. Internet shopping, online retail shopping is already a new normal. And we understand that this is going to be like this for the next many years. But it's a big challenge for the Department of Trade and Industry, especially on products that are bought from international platforms coming from other countries, products that are under the mandatory certification scheme of the Department of Trade and Industry, where these products need to be certified before they can come into the Philippine market. It's a challenge for us now that online shopping is prevalent and is very popular, and a lot of products coming into the Philippines under the mandatory certification scheme are not certified. And of course, the government has no way of checking these products. We have tried talking to the international platforms, and we hope that we can get a corrective mechanism from them. We are also very much aware of false or inaccurate information coming out in social media especially, and then there are also unfair commercial practices by sellers or businesses, and then the online payment security is also a challenge. We educate consumers on choosing the correct payment gateway so that they will not be defrauded by the sellers. Data protection and privacy is also an issue in the Philippines. Even online lending now, Filipinos would resort to online lending and then disclosing information to whoever it is on the other side, and then scattering their personal information in cyberspace. Dispute resolution is also an issue. And of course, the cross-border dispute resolution, which we really hope that the ACCP will be able to address in the future.
Thank you very much. I would like to now talk a little bit about the role of specific stakeholders, and we're going to come a little bit later then to how they need to join up their efforts. But I'd like to first of all sort of highlight the role of specific stakeholders. But I'm going to start with Lena Sophie Müller anyway, but I am going to start by just asking you to respond a bit to Helena Laurent, because I think I may have seen attention in your two last statements, but perhaps you can resolve it or also not. The point being that you had talked about the need to educate and empower, because in fact the technology is moving so fast that ensuring protective standards may mean we're always racing to catch up with technology that is moving ahead. So Helena Laurent, in a sense, I think, put it the other way around, saying because the technology moves so fast, it's so important to have those standardized protective frameworks in place. Could you comment on that?
Sure. I think we highlighted different aspects, which are both important. So what I was referring to are our survey about the population, and I was referring to basic skills, which I probably did not make clear enough. But so what we're referring to is the EU Digital Competency Framework for Citizens. So it's actually the skills you need to handle your everyday life and your work. So not specialist competency, which you would, for example, need to implement artificial intelligence in your business or create applications. For that, you of course need a lot more and deeper competencies in order to not make or not run into the problems that Mr. Miklis was referring to, for example, bias, discrimination, and all that. And if you want to address that, I think then what Mrs. Laurent said is very important, because then it comes to the responsibility of politicians and of company leaders and industry leaders to actually address their digital responsibility in, for example, the way they create products, the way they use standards, and politicians to actually also work on an international level and make sure that, for example, protection and consumer rights find influence in the standardization process with artificial intelligence, for example, which will change the world, hopefully for the better, but we do need to shape it.
Thank you very much. And now let me come to a question to you in your role working with a network that includes different stakeholders, but also especially business. We heard a lot from our ASEAN speakers, particularly yesterday, about the gaps and the need for evolution in terms of both political will and institutional structures as perhaps cultures move toward more of a regulatory approach than is currently present. So, with that background, to what degree do you think that voluntary codes of conduct, for example, among online vendors, marketplaces, and so on, can be effective? Are they mostly whitewashing, or is there real value there?
It depends on how you implement them. And I would also say that regulations itself is not going to solve the problem, and the self-regulation itself will not solve the problem either. But we do have the following problem. We have a world which has a technology which is accelerating so super fast that makes it very difficult for politicians, especially, you know, if you have to find solutions on international levels, to define what they actually want to regulate. Take artificial intelligence, for example. You have so many different use cases. For example, you can use it in your supermarket, you know, to control what's been taken out of the shelves. We use it in our smartphones, but you can also use it for surveillance and all that. So that makes it very difficult to regulate it. And so there is a gap, a vacuum of which is not really regulated. And here comes self-regulation into place. It does not mean that that this is the way we're gonna regulate in the future. We're just gonna let companies decide where they self-regulate. But for in a specific fields right now, we cannot regulate because we cannot really grasp the topic. So it is a lot better to self-regulate than to have nothing. And now when you speak of codes of conduct, for example, also what the Ministry of Judiciary in Germany does is they try to bring together different companies and talk to them, for example, about use of data, consumer protection, and they try to bring together different companies and find a common ground in that self-regulation. And I do think that this also has to do a lot with a cultural shift, a shift in mindset, also raising awareness among companies that they do have a corporate digital responsibility. And this, for example, has been a process, you know, years and years and years ago when we had the topic of corporate social responsibility. And now we need to transfer all that in the digital age, because actually companies are the stakeholders which shape our digital future in a huge way. And we need to raise awareness that they also have the responsibility to think about what's going to be the impact of my product, even, you know, like just in a couple of years or something. So I do think that the institutional self-regulation does have an important role right now, but it does not solve the problems. But we do have this vacuum, and I do not really see a different way to do it right now.
Of course, what we've also seen here in Germany in an area like supply chain sustainability, which of course is also relevant for many consumers, is First of all, as you talk about getting companies together, asking for codes of conduct and a voluntary approach, but making clear that there will be regulation if, in fact, there's not enough action. And that in fact, then came to pass, didn't it? Let me go now to Professor Miklitz and to Ruth Costello to essentially get your points of view on the same question, because we've talked a lot about the balance between education empowerment, education/empowerment on the one hand, self-regulation on the other, but the need in some areas for clear regulation by authorities. So first of all, to Professor Miklitz, what would you say are the key areas where you do see that need, where we do need to press ahead with regulation?
Let me clarify my starting point. It was mentioned in particular by Helen a number of times. What is discussed not only in law, but in cross-disciplinary, what might be called digital vulnerability. So the digital vulnerability, that's something to be taken absolutely serious, because digital vulnerability cannot be overcome by providing the consumer with ever more information. Yeah, that is just useless. So the digital vulnerability is a structural one. It has to do with the architecture of the net. It is relational. So means what we have to do is to find an approach how to cope with these structural elements that are enshrined in the design of how the consumer is communicating. And here is there, I think, where any effort has to handle the structural element, the structural dimension. So you have various ways how to do it. The first thing is this idea, again, to repeat it, what the European Commission is currently doing, what you find in all sorts of international documents, is ever more information. It's useless. Let me be very blunt on this. It's useless. So it's equally not possible for a public regulator, for a parliament, or for whomever to define what needs to be done. So that can only be done jointly, means the public authorities have to set a normative framework in a broad sense, but this framework has to be filled. And it can only be filled by bringing as has been said by others, by bringing companies in, by bringing the competence in from the companies. But, with a big but here, self-regulation, we are not short in self-regulation, please. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages on self-regulation now. And what is the effect of this? We don't know. Yeah? Is it only washing your hands? So what's needed in self-regulation is to involve civil society organizations. Yeah? Without the involvement of civil society organizations in the development, whatever it might be, technical standards, codes of conducts, yeah, consumer organizations, as we are talking about consumers here, must be involved. And there must be a mechanism of surveillance, of compliance and monitoring. If there is no such monitoring, that can be done in various ways. The internet offers wonderful new opportunities to do this, but we have to move forward when we discuss a regulatory approach. To sum it up, the key question is the structural element. The regulator cannot solve it, at least not the public ones. It can only be done in cooperation with industry and in cooperation with the civil society organizations.
Thank you very much. And let me go now, before I come to the two consumer organizations, civil society organizations, let me go to Ruth Costello and get that government perspective on regulation. And perhaps to start out, do you see an evolution in thinking within your region in regard to the need for regulation? And what would you consider to be the first areas where it would be imperative to enact more detailed regulatory structures?
Consumer protection, I will just have to say that I agree with Mr. McLeod earlier. Consumer protection is a whole of government approach. It needs the government to issue regulations and to actually regulate, monitor, and enforce compliance. But we also need businesses to collaborate with government so that the task will be easier and it will also strengthen consumer protection in the country. And that's what we do in the Philippines. We find some areas that need intensified consumer protection, and so we propose to Congress first the revision of the Consumer Act. It's a 1992 law that needs to be updated. We also have currently we're pushing for the Internet Transactions Act to cover issues that now arise in e-commerce and in consumer online retail shopping. There are certain areas that we need to address, especially the right now in the Internet Transactions Act, we have the data registry or the registry of businesses so that it'll be easier for government to be able to reach the merchants or the online merchants for consumer protection in case that there is any need to do that.
Thank you very much. And I'll go now to Ms. Laurent. And, you know, when we talk about digital inequalities, this is, of course, a problem within societies and then also internationally. And one of your slides made that point, showing us the different level of protection, I believe it was, that we see in many rich countries compared to poorer ones. And I wanted to ask you, as part of the answer about the role of consumer organizations and civil society, whether that's being driven top down or bottom up, that kind of a difference between wealthier countries and less wealthy countries. Is this because more informed consumers are demanding changes, or is it also coming from the top?
I think if I understand your question, what's interesting to me is when we have conversations amongst civil society from across the world, you will find a very significant call for change from low-income, emerging economies, because they are experiencing this right now just as much. Uganda, digital ID. India looking for a Consumer Protection Act. Obviously, India is very diverse in itself. You know, I think this is a worldwide call, but we are going through it at different paces with different levels of capacity. And what we need is to keep that in lockstep somehow and create the space for that to happen, or otherwise we will increase the inequalities that we already are suffering from. This is something where, you know, global companies or global business models, more importantly, are in place in all over the world. Trying to answer your question, I think the need for change and the perception of the need for change is there at whatever level. The capacity and the support for change and the ability to get into processes where there's a place to learn and speak and act together is very limited right now. And that's the thing that we need to create.
And can you just say briefly one more word about where you see the absolute central role of organizations like your own? Is it in this dialogue with other consumer organizations from other cultures, or what would you say is the crucial piece that you bring to this?
I think it's the connection with consumers based on their rights. So thinking constantly and providing that constant feedback and voice of what do I and what do we look for in a fair and safe and sustainable marketplace in a time where we are going through exceptional change and where we have almost impossible goals that we have to meet. Keeping that involvement, but also increasing agency. What I loved in what Lena Sophie said is, how do we get people engaged in a different way? The model of the marketplace has perhaps needs to change in the extent to which we have agency in our marketplace and control over our own data, control over the way in which the marketplace is moving. And so I think it's those two pieces that civil society can provide. It's also important that civil society needs to learn and change itself. That's a great conversation that's going on right now. How do you work with business when you speak such different languages? How do we make sure that we are on top of the latest digital changes? And you know, that's a very significant and important move and change and work to be done.
Saravan Thambiraja, may I ask you also to comment on the evolution of attitudes on the part of citizens, because we heard, Helena just touched on it, and we heard a very interesting input earlier from our Indonesian speaker, Melvin Sumapung. I don't know if you were following that discussion, but he talked about the fact that in Indonesia, they are seeing more interest now on the part of consumers to really fight for redress. He said perhaps attitudes in this culture in the past might have been more about societal harmonization, being part of the collective, but that there's an increasing sense on many people's parts about individual rights. Would you say that's true in Malaysia as well? And then also talk to us a little bit about how you see your own organization's role as part of civil society in spurring action on the part of other stakeholders like business, like government.
Thank you. I mean, one thing what we must agree when you posed the question earlier, whether it's self-regulation or regulated, we must understand business, their motive is to make money. And when you talk about self-regulation, or it's going to cost to them, it become a cost for them. So we don't see the businesses will take initiative to make them self-regulation and adhere to the whatever practice they're supposed to do it. But here in Malaysia, of course, we would like to see more forced regulation by the government. Why? This is why where the monitoring and enforcement, the government have the authority to go and investigate and even take charge on these businesses. Now the question you asked, where do consumers are empowered in Malaysia? Definitely in ASEAN, we see many consumer associations are coming out of the old way of doing advocacy. Now we are looking into cross-border consumer complaints. We are looking into new technology arising like e-commerce and so on. But what I would like to emphasize here, the industry is changing rapidly. Okay, like artificial intelligence coming in, face recognition is coming in, but it cannot be denied. The technical knowledge industry is far ahead and civil society is far behind. All right, so we as a civil society organization also need to empower ourselves with capacity building and so on, for us to do education and awareness for consumers at large.
Thank you very much. And I would like to bring in one question here from the audience, which I believe goes to dispute resolution. And it's a question from Roman Matejcik, and he's from the State Veterinary and Food Administration of the Slovak Republic. And he's asking whether the guests, but in fact, I'm going to, I think, put this question directly to Professor Miklitz, if I may, asking for the opinion on the rising awareness of the use of direct consumer protection rights, directly essentially negotiated between consumer and operator, let's say vendor or operator of an online marketplace, to reduce the need for enforcement bodies to act. Professor, do you have a thought on that?
I have a thought on that. We had, I think all over the world, we had quite some hope in this kind of dispute settlement with the help of technology. Yeah? But to some extent, it seems that we are a bit stuck. So the best system that I know of is in Brazil, where you have a countrywide system of consumer complaints collection, which is in a way the basis for a kind of online dispute settlement. And maybe also in China, you have efforts in this direction, as far as I know. But the dream of, let's say, having technology as a kind of mediator between the different positions of the consumer and the trader in an individual case did not realize. Yeah? So there may be various reasons for this, but as I said, we are a bit stuck here in the development and looking for new ideas. In principle, let's say my personal take is I have much sympathy for this, in particular when it comes to low-profile conflicts that can be standardized. There was also an effort at UNCTAD, within UNCTAD, to set up such a system. But again, it was not taken up by political authorities, so to move it forward. But I would not give it up. I think this is definitely an avenue to pursue.
Thank you very much for that. Dear panel, I must say this fascinating discussion has almost reached its end in terms of the window of time left to us. Nonetheless, I really want us to at least touch on the question of stakeholder cooperation. So I'm going to ask, we have about a minute per speaker. I'm going to ask for you to just briefly tell us what you see as the most fruitful areas of cooperation between different stakeholders, between government policy, between policymakers, business, and civil society, where you see the biggest gaps, the most fruitful areas for improved coordination in future, and what your top priority would be in this area. And again, I'm going to go straight across the panel and ask for very brief answers, if you would. So please, Lene Sophie Müller.
Well, I do think that a fruitful cooperation is if you include companies when it comes to shaping the digital future, right? So I'm talking about the digital consumer protection and all that. I think you need to involve the companies and you need to find a project that is actually looking forward, so to progress and not look so too much to the history. I think companies need to involve their staff because that also gives you a good view on the individual and not only the interests of the company. You definitely need, and I agree with the panel, you need to include civil society just because they have a different point of view on values, on ethics. And of course, you need to involve the political stakeholders because we need the combination of self-regulation and regulation via laws and all that. But companies are usually the ones who have more knowledge on technologies. And then political stakeholders, for example, they have more competencies in weighing different values and creating a fair environment. And so I do think that the corporations from industry, politicians or administration, and civil societies are the most fruitful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Professor Miklitz, please.
The digital society offers new opportunities of cooperation and coordination between civil societies all over the world. And I think the global value chains and the problems that arise within the global value chains offer new opportunities for cooperation. And I would dream, and here I look in particular at Helena and her organization, but maybe others too. I think what we need is a kind of a guidebook, on a rule book on how to organize resistance in civil society and organize countervailing power over the internet in concrete circumstances. Yeah, I think this is a field where I see a lot of potential that is not really exhausted, and where we are still at the very beginning of discovering the opportunities that this offers. But this is a new form of countervailing power. We cannot compare it to the 1960s when it was discussed in the US by Galbraith. That's not what I mean. I mean really this new forms that are ad hoc opportunities with a loose institutional framework and participants that can join in with whatever capacity. That requires a new framework. Yeah, so that's what I would like to stress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting indeed. Mrs. Laurent.
I was taking notes there. Thank you. So first, thank you to the organizers for setting up this opportunity for discussion. I do think we will see a very different marketplace in the future. I think one idea for the group is, let's take some of the key areas we need to change: food, finance, energy. We know collectively we need to make that move forward, and we need to take every tool at our disposal now and use them so that we get there in a way that's fair for all of us and safe, and we're in a different position. Can we take one of those areas and really use that, apply all of our knowledge and build towards those goals? That's the sort of approach I would take. I think so frequently also the digital and the sustainability conversations are siloed as much as anything else, and that is going to be to our detriment too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And let's go now to Saravan and Thambiraja for your thoughts about stakeholder cooperation, biggest priority going forward.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Helena. And also I would like to add here, all the other stakeholders, especially the regulator and the business, must acknowledge civil society as well. And they also have responsibility to work together with civil society. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, a viewpoint from policymaking. Ruth Costello, please.
Yes, as a government agency involved in consumer protection, we formulate and develop policies that will directly affect the consumers. And it's very important for us to get the stakeholders' position, whether it's a consumer, a business group, or the academe or other government agencies. We conduct public consultations or focus group discussions so that we can obtain the positions or inputs of these stakeholders. It's also very important that Congress of the Philippines, when they tackle bills on consumer protection or those that directly involve the consumer, they also solicit inputs from consumer protection agencies, business entities, business organizations, and other consumer groups. So the engagement of the public sector is very important in the formulation of laws involving consumer protection. And the gap that I would see is when the private sector, whether it's business or the academe or consumer organizations, do not send us their inputs, and then we are forced to promulgate policies or laws without their inputs. And then so later on, they will question the policies that we promulgate.
Thank you very, very much to all of our speakers for this very thought-provoking, very wide-ranging discussion. I think you've given all of us a lot to think about in this area. And we have now come to the end of our window for the panel. Unfortunately, a question or two did come in from the audience that we didn't have time to get to. But I assure you, dear audience members, we will pass on those questions to our speakers to be sure that they do get your input. And the same goes for comments that have come in on our chat function. So again, my very warmest thanks to that excellent panel for sharing their thoughts. And that does nearly wrap up day 2 of our conference. But before I go back to our hosts and co-organizers for their closing words, I'd like to get the audience's take on what we've heard over these 2 days of discussion in this online conference on consumer protection. We have one poll for you and one word cloud. I'm going to do the poll first, so please use your online tool. As always, you will see our question just under the chat function on the right side of your screens on this live stream. Click on your preferred answer, please, to the following question. What was the most important session for you? We are very eager to get your feedback. Session 1 on promoting digital self-determination of consumers. Session 2 on new technologies to facilitate consumer access to justice. Or this session we've just had, the panel discussion, role of civil society, business, and policymakers in shaping digital consumer policy. And while I let you keep voting on that multiple choice, I'm also going to present our question for a word cloud, and it essentially asks all of you to weigh in on the same question I posed there at the end to our panel. And that question was also a question about everybody's top priority in terms of stakeholder cooperation. And the question is this: what is your top priority topic for future cooperation on consumer protection? And in this case, dear ladies and gentlemen, you can simply type a word into the chat window, again, on the right side of your screens, and that will slowly begin to form a word cloud. So while that word cloud is forming, I wonder if we can, well, actually, let's just keep letting this play out, because it looks like we've already got quite a few entries there. So I'm seeing a big word exchange appearing here, no doubt reflecting the real hunger for best practice exchange in this area where the technology and the measures of dealing with it are evolving so very rapidly. Then I'm also seeing international cooperation, again, something that we've talked about again and again. The differences between different societies, different legal cultures, but also the potential for us to learn from each other. And I think we've done a great deal of that over the past 2 days. Then I'm also seeing, of course, very large in our word cloud, justice. Clearly, the need for access to justice on the part of consumers, empowerment and public awareness, obviously part of that, as are digital skills, as we just heard in our panel, but also redress, options for redress, and those options, of course, include legal technology. Then what else are we seeing here? Legal tech, also coming in very big there in our word cloud. Digital responsibility, which goes again to the question of self-regulation on the part of business, codes of conduct. I'm also seeing the word regulation. A number of our speakers did underline over the course of the 2 days that as important as awareness and options for redress are, we also do need regulatory measures that define people's rights, that help limit harmful practices and harmful technologies like dark patterns, for example, something that was mentioned by the State Secretary on our first day of discussion. And what else am I seeing here? Targeted advertising mentioned here, of course, as a questionable practice. Strengthening civil voices. We heard some very, very strong statements just now about the role of civil society, the role of consumer organizations in that stakeholder cooperation. So thank you very much, dear participants. You've made a great contribution here. Can we go back to the poll result on that first poll? Do we have that slide that we could put up for our audience? Because we didn't get a chance to see the final result there. There we go. So 42.55% of you saying that you really appreciated the session on new technologies that facilitate access to legal redress. Great to know that. Thank you. And those were indeed very compelling presentations, both from the European point of view and from the ASEAN point of view. Then we have 31.9% who very much valued our panel discussion. Indeed, what a broad outlook from so many different voices across the stakeholder spectrum. And finally, 25.53% of you saying that you really appreciated our discussion yesterday on what we can do through empowerment and awareness to enhance consumers' digital self-determination. So a pretty even breakdown there, but definitely a lot of you appreciating that discussion about legal technology. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I so much appreciate your points of view on all of this. And now to begin wrapping up our conference, I would like to go back to our hosts and co-organizers. It is a great pleasure now to hand over the floor to Mr. Louis Tek Keong. We heard from him yesterday. He is, of course, the head of the Competition, Consumer Protection, and Intellectual Property Rights Division within the ASEAN Secretariat. Dear sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Crane. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I hope everyone had a wonderful 2.5 days conference, and we have learned quite a lot on the current state of consumer protection within Germany, European Union, and ASEAN. And it seems like these 2 days had been pretty brief, and information delivered are highly concentrated and impactful to us. And mentioned in the opening remarks delivered yesterday by Dato' Sri Hasnul Zamzam bin Haji Ahmad, it's remarkable how, and also quite unthinkable, how quickly the world has changed in the very recent years with the advent of the World Wide Web and also smartphones. The evolution of the digital economy and e-commerce have drastically changed how consumers operated and behave. Gone now are the days that distance will limit consumers should they want to seek to purchase products or services from overseas, as wider selections or options are available for them to purchase online with competitive prices. From our recent meetings with other regions, such as the European Union, it is well understood that consumer protection in e-commerce and cross-border trading is still very well within its infancy, while the technologies for digital economy seem to be relentlessly improving. As advancement in the digital economy might stretch our limited resources to monitor and enforce existing consumer protection policies, smarter strategies must be adopted in formulating further policies focusing more towards a specific goal that may result in a bigger impact for consumer protection. Now, although government constitutions are doing everything they can through establishing policies and regulations to answer consumer protection needs in the digital economy, it is indeed incomplete should the average consumers are not aware of potential dangers and risks that they may encounter online, or understanding their rights as well as practice them. Now, as we have seen already in this conference, consumer education is fundamental to the sustainability of the digital economy and the benefits it has given to our economy and the consumers. Such sustainability relies on consumer trust and peace of mind when doing business online. If such trust would disappear, one can only imagine the negative impact it would cause to all of us. I'm, for one, very grateful that we are able to take examples from existing experiences from our speakers and panelists today, who brought fresh and unique perspectives on the issue at hand. Some are tried and tested, Others are experimental. As I've mentioned before, one of the key deliverables within the ASEAN Strategic Action Plan, or the ASAP-CP, is the e-commerce guidelines. The topics that were discussed here would be invaluable towards the formulation and creation of this guideline for ASEAN. This guideline is without a doubt a very important deliverable for the ACCP, as it may carry over towards many years ahead. And I hope that this guideline will establish a benchmark for ASEAN online businesses and allow us to become capable and trusted, to have trusted online businesses in the world. Before I end my remarks, I would like to thank once again Dato Sri Haji Hasnul Zamzam bin Haji Ahmad for his time and also providing his very warm remarks at the start of the conference. I'd also like to thank Mr. Christian Kastrop, the State Secretary of the BMJ, for his keynote speech on the first day, as well as the rest of the colleagues from BMJV for their support in co-organizing this conference, the ACCP and the ASEAN Secretariat. I look forward for the many more activities in the future with you, and I have no doubt that it will benefit us in the long run. I would like to thank Ms. Juliana Niktas Siswartono from the Atma Jaya Catholic University for her excellent presentation on consumer risk in evolving digital landscape in ASEAN, giving us a deeper yet academic perspective and insight of the current and future challenges we all may face for e-commerce in ASEAN. I'm sure that we'll cross many paths with you, most likely on future conferences and projects to tackle these issues. I'd like to thank Ms. Monika Schneidger from Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich with a presentation on demands against online trickery, consumer protection rules for online markets. Mr. Klaus Müller from the Board of Federation of German Consumer Organization of BV on his presentation on activities of civil society or consumer centers that contribute to empowerment. Dr. Vimorat Wim Teria Pirom from the Office of the Consumer Protection Board of OCPB, Thailand, on a presentation on digital literacy and on vulnerable consumers. Mr. Christian Torren from Cons Policy Institute giving us a deeper and professional insights on consumer enabling technologies. Mr. Muhammad Hazman bin Haji Alim for the impressive consumer enabling technology from Brunei Darussalam. Thank you also for Ms. Alicia Ander, Chair of the Board of Legal Tech Deutschland, and Mr. Melvin Sumapong, CEO of Justika Hukum Online Indonesia. Both have presented a very comprehensive view and insight on legal tech, which I firmly believe will have a key role towards the future of online consumer protection, especially cross-border trade as well as any disputes. For the panel discussion today, I'd like to thank the panelists, Ms. Lena Sophie Miller from D21 Germany, Mr. Hans Wolfgang Mixklis from the European University Institute, Ms. Helena Larong from Consumers International, Mr. Saravanan Tambiraja from the Federation of Malaysia Consumer Association, and Ms. Ruth Castello, Undersecretary for the Department of Trade and Industry of the Philippines. All have shown and brought to the discussion some very interesting but important insights on how policymaking and regulations would be incomplete should your average consumers not practice their rights or be aware or know how to practice their rights when a dispute comes to light. I'd also like to mention and thank colleagues from the GIZ, Ms. Zita Zempel, Mr. Agus Chatur Arianto Putro, Ms. Caroline Pratama, and Ms. Ali Hayu Shafira Wahyu Putri in their assistance to coordinate the BMJV and the ACCP for the conference and their continued support towards the ACCP and the Protect project. A big thank you to the ACCP, the ACCEC, and ACAN, Association and Consumer Association Network, members and their invited guests and stakeholders present here today who has not lost sight of the important work we are doing for a better consumer protection and digital economy for the citizens of ASEAN. A special thanks as well to Ms. Melinda Crane, as Dr. Crane, for her excellent moderation and doing so in a very professional way. And lastly, I'd like to thank all the audience and members here today who has taken their time to join, learn, and also participate in the discussion of the topics we have talked about in this conference. I hope that everyone here has benefited greatly from the knowledge and discussion received, and hope that together we can achieve a more advanced yet secure economic cooperation through digital economy and e-commerce. That is all from me. Thank you very much. Back to you again, Ms. Crane.
Mr. Lui Tek Keong, thank you very much for those very kind words and for the ASEAN Secretariat's extremely valuable support for this truly, truly enlightening exchange on the subject of consumer protection in the digital age. I would like now to go to our host here in Germany, the State Secretary in Germany's Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, Christian Kastrup, for his closing thoughts. The floor is yours.
Datuk Seri Haj Hasnol Zamzam bin Haj Ahmad, Mrs. Ruth Costello, Mr. Lui Tek Keong, dear speakers and colleagues from ASEAN, GIZ and BMJV. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 brilliant conference days are behind us. We have gained insights into the pressing issues posed by digitalization. And we have explored crucial measures for ensuring consumer rights in ASEAN nations as well as in Germany and Europe. Firstly, let me say that I am delighted that we have made this conference happen, together with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the support of the German Cooperation for International Cooperation. Since businesses are increasingly operating globally, we also need to strengthen consumers globally. After all, consumers share very similar interests, no matter where they are located. Thus, this conference is a prime example of cross-border international partnership on consumer protection and empowerment. So, I'm very grateful for everybody involved in this conference, and I'm hoping for more events of this kind to come. And I'm also hopeful that we can take away a number of valuable inputs for joint work in the future. Best practices, inspiring thoughts on empowering consumers in the digital sphere, harnessing new technologies like legal tech can help to shape what I call a human-centric digital governance. This is an institutional setup that combines the needs of consumers, firms and science in adopting digital technologies. And this is all to serve in the best interest of consumers and a prosperous civil society. Digital transformation has permanently affected routines in our daily lives. Citizens, as consumers, have become accustomed to digital day-to-day tasks from the convenience of their own homes. Likewise, citizens rightly expect to gain digital access to justice as well. At the same time, digital tools also have the great potential to support and to improve the work of lawyers and of courts. Such tools will contribute to improve the quality of justice and access to legal counsel, thereby helping citizens to better assert their rights. And this is important. And moreover, the COVID-19 pandemic has also highlighted the need for further digitalization in the judiciary. That is why the use of digital tools in the area of justice is also a key issue on the legal policy agenda of the European Union and its member states. The Council of the European Union recently adopted joint council conclusions on access to justice, seizing the opportunities of digitalization, which address the issues of a digital judicial agenda. It's paramount at the same time that new technologies are used in a responsible way. Guarantees of the rule of law must not be undermined by digital technologies. And this requires high standards and great care in the use of digital technology. The use of new technologies must always be in harmony with fundamental freedoms and rights, and they have to provide a high level of consumer protection and civil society empowerment. A case in point for these aspects is a recent proposal for a regulation on artificial intelligence, which is certainly one of the most important digital dossiers in Europe right now. The European Commission published this far-reaching draft already in April 2021, and the aim of the draft legislation is to position the EU's internal market also as a pioneer for a development of a safe, trustworthy and innovative artificial intelligence for consumers and civil society across Europe. In my view, this conference underscored the notion that regulating artificial intelligence is not only important in Europe and in Asian states, but it's actually everywhere in the world. And after all, themes like digital self-determination and best practices in consumer-enabling technologies are crucial to protect and empower consumers and civil society in the age of artificial intelligence. And there is much more to come. So, those themes will become harder to combine with disruptive technologies like AI if we do not update legal frameworks. So I'm very convinced that regulating artificial intelligence does not harm the innovative capacity of those technologies. On the contrary, but we have to do it in the right way. Quite the opposite. Regulating artificial intelligence in a human-centric way will create trust, and this trust is conducive to successful artificial intelligence business models. By the way, the same logic applies to our efforts supporting consumers on e-commerce platforms. Take, for instance, the Digital Services Act, another issue currently discussed in the European Union system. This new package will clarify liability rules and hopefully strengthen consumers on e-commerce platforms, for example, when it comes to manipulative techniques such as dark patterns. So, this whole package will, like artificial intelligence regulation, create more trust, serving both consumers and businesses. These are just examples of where the themes of this conference meet current initiatives in regulation on the spot. Surely there are many more challenges ahead. So, let us all tackle together these to further advance consumer protection and the trust of consumers in new technologies. And this is key. Once again, I thank all organizers, including those, of course, involved from my ministry, who made this wonderful conference possible. And I'm very grateful to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and GIZ for valuable support in making this event happen. And last but not least, the excellent input of speakers and participants. So, personally, I'm looking very much forward to continuing the cooperation with ASEAN. I am very confident that we will be able to build on these important consumer policy issues in the future. Surely, one day, we will and should be continuing these discussions in person. But until then, stay safe and all the best for you and your families.
Thank you so much, State Secretary, for those kind words and for that very clear statement of where you and the ministry see the priorities for the future in terms of protection for online consumers. And dear ladies and gentlemen, that does bring our conference to an end. But hopefully, as you just heard there, we will experience future installments. And I certainly would welcome the opportunity to continue this extremely interesting and wide-ranging conversation. In our word cloud earlier, we saw that, that phrase international exchange coming in very big in terms of what many of you see as the priority. And certainly the exchange here over the past 2 days has been very international. We've had 46 different countries registered amongst the participants, with a pretty even balance between Asia, Europe, and other regions of the world. So that is truly remarkable in and of itself. I'd like to thank the hosts and organizers once again for making this exchange possible. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for their very, very important and interesting inputs. And I'd like to thank you, dear audience, for your attention during these very intensive sessions, and also for your contributions in the way of questions and comments. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I do hope that our paths will cross again in future. Until then, goodbye.
you